Well, there's sinful slander, of course. John MacArthur told a story about slander. He told a story that a certain church was going to hold a meeting accusing him of false teaching.
This is a Truth Transforms Truth Nugget, a daily dose of truth for your daily transformation.
Now, you remember, of course, what James said about pure religion and what he said about those who think they have a pure religion but don't control their tongue. He said, if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. So the person that's continually insulting, the person that's continually rude, the person that continually belittles people, James is saying this is not a pure religion. This is not the way that a Christian is supposed to behave. Growing Christians will grow in godly speech. And we need to make sure that we're growing in godly speech. And now when we were back on this in chapter 3, I did a list of some different types of sinful speech just to give an idea there. And I'll just review a few of them. Just walk through the list real quick. I mean, there's gossip. Gossip is, of course, when you're spreading information about someone with or without their permission, whether it's true or false. That's gossip. Then there's slander. That would be spreading false information about someone. And there's things like harsh speech, insults, rude remarks, belittling. This would all be ways to tear someone down rather than build them up. There's profanity. There's bitter sarcasm. Bitter sarcasm being using the wit that God gives us with a little bitter undertone under it. You know, we're so proud of our wit, and there's a little bitter undertone under that. There's self-righteous boasting, when self-righteousness comes out of our mouths and we boast about the things that we do. And of course, there's blasphemy. People using the name of the Lord in vain, of course, or saying things like, well, Christians and Mormons, we all worship the same God. It's called blasphemy, another form of sinful speech. These are all types of sinful speech, and we want to recognize them and put them off. And we want to get recognize any tendency we have toward any one of these forms of sinful speech and get it out of our life. And it's a lot to take in. I hope we can recognize, at least somewhere, the times in which we fall short, the times in which we say things that are inappropriate, the times in which we sin in our speech. And this isn't just some lesson for someone out there who's sinful in their speech. If we're all going to be honest, we all fall short in our speech, unless certainly you are perfect, then you are beyond Jesus. Not beyond Jesus, because he's the only one that is perfect. But we need to seek to be pure in our speech. So these are types of sinful speech. We need to recognize any tendency we have to sinful speech, confess it to the Lord, and take the necessary steps to apply the change that is needed in our lives. So what are some examples of sinful speech? Where do we see sinful speech occur? A number of examples you could give. There's of course slander. There are even things like sinful scheming. I mean, I've read some horror stories about pastors being slandered, people leaving the church, not happy with something in the church, and then they slander all over social media, all over the place, say things that are not true. I've read horror stories about power groups in the church, deacons or elders in the church aren't happy with a certain pastor selected, and then they have secret meetings and gather up slander. And I've heard horror stories like that. That kind of stuff should not be happening in the house of God. Well, there's sinful slander, of course. John MacArthur told a story about slander. He told a story that a certain church was going to hold a meeting accusing him of false teaching. They were accusing him of false teaching, and he found out they were going to have this meeting. He thought, well, I'm going to give them the truth. And so he called them up. He got a hold of the pastor in this smaller church, and the pastor picked up the phone. He said, this is John MacArthur. The guy was a little surprised. He's talking to John MacArthur, and he said, I'd like to come down there, and I'd like to, if you would let me, just answer any of the questions that you guys have about what you're accusing me of. And the guy was very surprised that he would actually make that phone call and be willing to do that, but he's like, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. You see, that would ruin the party. That would ruin the slander party. They weren't actually looking for truth. And then, these are forms of slander. There's also belittling. Anytime someone is talked down, that would be belittling to make someone feel less about themselves. And our speech should be guided by the commandment given in Ephesians 4:29. Paul tells us that in that verse, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. So we need to make sure that our speech is godly speech, that we're growing in purity of speech, that we're putting off sinful speech, confessing it to others and repenting of it and growing in godly speech. So let me ask you about your week. Is there anything that you said this week that you might regret? That's just something worth thinking about. Was your speech always loving and gracious, or were there times when your speech, when ungraciousness flowed out of your mouth? That might be something to consider. Because I think that if you're honest, you're going to think, well, there was a time this week that I spoke inappropriately. And if you're not thinking that, then let me step it up a bit. If we were to take a recording of everything you said throughout this week and play it through these speakers, would there be anything embarrassing due to sinful speech? Whether it be an insult, whether it be belittling, whether it be harsh speech, whatever it might be? I'm going to guess the answer is yes. The answer would probably be yes for every one of us in here. But we need to be growing in godly speech and putting off sinful speech.
Well, I do pray that was a blessing. Now do me a favor, and if you enjoyed today's Truth Nugget, go ahead and hit that like button. That really does help to spread this to more people. Also, if you're new to the channel, you've joined us in the middle of a series on the book of James. And you can find all of the Truth Nuggets on the book of James in a playlist that'll be available in the description and also on the channel homepage. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next episode.